Hey guys, today I'm going to go over block periodization, specifically undulating block periodization, specifically the way we train. The other side of the argument is linear periodization, and this isn't 1930s. Linear periodization is dead, unless you're a beginner and certain other things. It's kind of ridiculous. You're not going to find linear periodization in Olympic sports. You're not going to find linear periodization in high performance athletics. The only time you'll see linear periodization is mistakes. What is linear periodization? It doesn't matter what energy system, if you're doing hypertrophy, strength, power and speed, or CrossFit for that matter. Every week is do it more, do it faster, do it heavier, regardless of the results prior or experience. And that's the idea, is we're just going to continue to do linear overload in hopes that that's the Bulgarian method. That's what, if you ever heard the Bulgarian method, Bulgaria, they don't develop too much. They just say, hey, who's going to be doing it? This is the program you're going to fit in. Whoever survives that, not literally death, but from the age of 9 to 18, anyone that makes it through that ends up being quite good, right? And that's what you see in buds and other things. Like, some guys don't do a lot of training and they get through it and you're like, well, how'd that happen? Well, that's the Bulgarian method, okay? By doing more of something does not yield a greater adaptation. So what we do is we pull from the Olympic world, the wrestling world, the fight world, the decathlete world, the baseball, the football, the hockey world. What do they use? Undulating block periodization. Why? Because the cliche of I've always got to be ready can only happen if you're doing undulating block periodization, right? Because if we wanted to say, hey, okay, like let's get an idea of where are you extrapolating this idea, right? My background is combatives, wrestling, swimming, baseball, and I've done a lot of coaching on the fight side, UFC type situations, right? So what you see is, how do you prepare these people with like these given contests, or like the last time the Olympics was in Rio de Janeiro, the World Championships for wrestling, the Worlds was in Russia 9 weeks prior. So they had to peak for it, get ready, rest, they had 9 weeks to get to the Olympics, right? So there is, when do we train? I gotta always be ready, yes. So that is what those athletes use, in that constantly traveling and constantly having to compete at a high level. What they use is undulating block periodization. So what we do is, instead of saying you're a wrestler, you're this, we kind of look at the context of sport and go, how do they do it, right? And then we go, okay, since that's how they do it, well, let's look at the survey, what it looks like in buds and deployments and things, and go, okay, they're not certainly a one-for-one overlap, but they give us a good idea of, well, if you look at a decathlete, you can't be great at everything, but you got to be pretty good at everything. And it's day in and day out. And how do we get all decathlete, deca, 10? So decathletes are 10 events. So how do you get all 10 events and train for them, okay? It's block periodization, undulating, okay? So, right, I've got my hypertrophy 2.0, I got my strength rebirth, and I got my power and speed 2.0. Every other program we have is in block format. That's why day one is day 1, day 2, day 3, because Monday is not a body part. Monday is not International Bench Day. It's not International Bicep Day. It's not International Leg Day. It's Monday. Monday is Monday. So we don't name those. You don't. Like, if you really, really want to be ready, it's a really bad idea to condense all the training you need to do, because we're looking at running. You got to be able to run. But you've got to be able to run short distances. You got to be able to run long distances, right? And then you have, right? Then you have there's basically all the running within the selection, like the running, jogging, all that. There's different kinds of running. So we can't just do linear running, run more, run further, run faster. It doesn't develop the athlete at all. What it does is it creates so much specificity, right? A form of linear training that isn't weight training would be like golf, hitting off a tee, or baseball, hitting off a tee. That's linear. I can keep hitting and see a progress and keep adding that work volume to a point, okay? But we can't do that in here, okay? We've got to undulate. Undulating means changing or varying, but that's also what a conjugate is. So it's an undulating block periodization conjugate, okay? So we are trying to look at you guys and kind of treat you guys similarly to a decathlete. A lot of things, we got to get the time in. So what does that timeline look like? Okay. Your first step is like I said, don't relegate all the work that you want to do or need to do for selection. Like I said, run, swim, push, pull, sit, O course, log PT. But within each one of those, right, you got your sit-up test for the PST, but then you have all the sit-ups and abdominal and hip flexor work in selection. So you can't just train for one. You got to have a multifaceted athletic experience that gives you variety and diversity based on your needs, okay? And that's why our hypertrophy program is 12 weeks instead of 25 or 30. And we don't suggest just repeating hypertrophy over and over because it doesn't work. My programs won't work. It doesn't matter whose programs they are. Hypertrophy has its limits. Same with strength, same with power and speed. And that's where we have to undulate. Undulation means changing them, right? But so the undulation also implies that like it's not a clear-cut change it at this week. The undulation it could shift based on our state of readiness, right? Because your first time through hypertrophy 2.0 or through hypertrophy, you probably get all 12 weeks. And then you have strength, you got 8 weeks. Then you got power and speed, you got 5 weeks. But the next time through, as you're taking notes, you might get to like week 6 or 7 and go, ooh, I'm not quite getting the same adaptation after week 7 this time. Well, what do? We crisis? No, we stop. Then we shift energy system to strength, right? And before, like I said, it was 8 weeks long, but the second time through, you might feel that you're hitting a plateau or you're not getting the same results based on your work effort. Well, we just stop that maybe at week 5, maybe week 4, maybe even week 3. And then we go what? Power and speed, right? As long as you are human, you have to follow really kind of that mode. Not have to. That the body adapts in a certain order, right? Strength does not precede tissue remolding. Hypertrophy, increase, tissue, trophy. So increase tissue is hypertrophy. Or we can say remold tissue. We can also say repair tissue in hypertrophy. So that's what we're trying to do. We're seeing, okay, once I come to the point where my body stimulus isn't growing or adapting or healing, well, I just change the stimulus to then propagate more growth, more healing. Because again, strength does not precede tissue repair or size, right? Because strength training isn't size training. That's hypertrophy is size training. When we go to strength, that's tension training, tension and posture training, right? And then we go to power and speed, which is we get our durability, we get our explosiveness, we get our resiliency, we get our injury preventions from not just power and speed, but because we got it in that order. I got my new tissue, hypertrophy. When I get my new tissue, what do? I got to take my new tissue and make it strong, strength. Now I have new, strong tissue. Now I have to make that new, strong tissue really durable. That's power and speed, okay? So what we're gonna do is, like I said, your rest and your recovery really are the things that if you've maximized your rest and recovery, then we can set our hair on fire and train intensity with a lot more frequency. If we don't in any model, we're gonna get a lot of fallback. Okay, so the blocks. I want you to think of like if you're looking at a calendar, right? I want you to kind of visualize a calendar in front of you, but there's no Monday through Friday. There's no June in the month, but they're just open blocks, okay? And it's like you go to hypertrophy, right? You start it and you're like, yep, I'm gonna go through 8 weeks of this because last time I went through 12, okay, or whatever. I went through 8 weeks last time and I kept good notes. And as I'm going through hypertrophy this time, each block, I'm gonna assess how I'm feeling, right? Was it better than last time? Is it, because I have to have something to compare it against, right? So I wanna compare against myself with previous history. So I might, in my block, like I did in that calendar I mentioned, it's like day 1 gets dropped into that calendar. Day 2, bam. Day 3, bam, right? Look like, okay, what do I want to do there? Maybe I could just slide that next block over and drop in a ruck or a run. And that's the idea, is when you have a block model, when we all experience plateau, it's like, oh shit, what do I do? Do I just keep pressing harder through this? And no. It's a good thing we recognize that we're kind of plateauing. That's the first indicator of, hey, switch up your stimulus. And when you do, boom, you get this big jump in performance. We feel like, oh my God, I feel like stronger, fitter. Yeah, because we just kind of shifted the nervous system's ability to adapt to a new stressor, right? Strength is not hypertrophy. Hypertrophy is not power and speed, okay? So you can't synonymously say, I'm gonna strength train. Now, this isn't 1930, okay? If you're training for strength, it's because your numbers have dictated it, right? And strength numbers for a decathlete are not the same correlative strength as a power lifter in that sport. There's some very correlation in some of the movement techniques and principles, but we gotta stop comparing our tactical athletes against like these extremes. Like decathlete can be an extreme, an Olympic champion, but like we had some really good triathletes and decathletes that I've seen in the community, but I've never seen powerlifters. I've never seen bodybuilders. But you see a lot of guys, like I was saying, like the more athletes and the more diverse you end up being, typically you end up having a higher sense of success. So block periodization is really in your favor. So that way when you're taking notes, you can recognize when this shift happens, okay? Because like I said, every single one of our programs is in a block format for this reason. And that's the really cool thing, is because you realize real quick, right? On these, it says day 1, day 2, 3, 4, 5, may go to 7 or 8. But that's why you're like, well, Jeff, if I do all 7 in a row, isn't that filling up my week? It's like, no, you don't fill them all up, right? Because most people were saying, hey, if you're trying to work on, get more push-ups, better your run time and your swim, you're not just doing hypertrophy every single day. You might be doing 2 or 3 weight room training sessions, then you might be doing a ruck, and then you might be doing a swim, back to the weight room, back to the weight room, back to the road or track, back to the pool. That's why blocks, because like as I'm building my thing, I'm not trying to say, because most people on this path want or need to improve on more than one thing. So with the intensity and the volume that you need to improve these things, if you condense them too much, we create so much overtraining that you can't recover from it, right? And if you can't recover from it, then why are we doing it, right? And that's the whole idea, is we want you to train hard. We want you to work hard. We want you to know you can do all of that, because why? Because you have the power to shift your intensities, you have the power to shift your volumes, and you have the power to create more rest and recovery. And if you, in a block undulating periodization model, it allows for just that. It allows for the leniency of saying, today wasn't my best day. Because one of the really cool things about block periodization is, for you guys, because you do follow the program so well, like you get weeks into it and you're like, oh man, this is awesome, but I'm freaking pooped. And then every time almost we audit the person and go, well, when's the last time you had a day off? And they're like, oh shoot, man, I've only had 2 days off in the last 20 days. It's because the training has been going so well and you've been appropriating good rest periods. And then we just get busy and we just start chunking up days in a row. And we're like, oh, and then we take a day off. And then the next day you're like, oh my God, I feel like a rock star. Yeah, because you were able to recover. We're not saying don't train hard, guys. And on those days that are really, really hard, that's why we say, when you get to a program like, oh man, it's calling for a heavy leg day or a high volume, I'm not feeling it today, man. I had a rough day, a busy day. I didn't feel like, so we just take that day that's supposed to be hard on legs day. It's a block. We shift that block to the right. We drop something in there that's either acquiring a skill, or it becomes a recovery day, or it becomes something that we go to work because I can't sit still. I know I need to move. Like maybe it's biceps. We do a little bit of biceps, a little bit of stretch, okay? And by doing that, by recognizing, hey, I need a bit of a rest, but I can't quite sit still, I'm gonna pull back on this block. I'm gonna say, this block isn't gonna work for me. I'm gonna slide it over, drop one in from any program that you can do that's not compromising your output. You can just reach into a rucking program, drop it in there. Reach into a swimming program, drop it in there, right? There are some rules to it, but at the end of the day, if you are recognizing your stimulus is coming to a point where you're not able to push through it, oftentimes it's just, we shift that day, drop something in, so then the next day it's like, oh, I can get back to my legs day then, because I gave myself a moment to recover a bit more that allowed me to prepare for that next day, okay? So, and last thing on this, guys, is block periodization It will only make sense. It will only make sense if you practice, if you do it, right? Like a linear periodization model where you're just increasing volumes all the time. Listen, if it was that simple, if it was just, hey man, you've done 20 push-ups, you've done 6 pull-ups, and you're running a 12.5-minute mile and a half. The advice you always get is run more, lift more. If running more, lifting more, and swimming more worked, there would be 0 YouTube channels about fitness. There would be 0 people out there training and teaching this, because linear programming does not work.